Why don't we go ahead and kick things off? GM, everybody. So at some point, I think that, as usual, we'll want to run through some development updates on the Beanstalk Farms front. But of course, the topic. Oh, hey Randy, could you mute?
Oh, my bad.
No worries. Of course, the topic of the day in the Discord has been around some of what the work remaining to be done regarding a exploit recovery effort could look like, who's going to do the work, who's going to fund the work, and some of the discussion in the Discord felt like it had devolved a little bit. So Publius dropped some long comments in the general chat. I also followed up there with some of the processes that folks can follow to get any and all work around this effort funded. So figured we could, just to kick off the meeting, could open the floor on that end to see if there's any comments, questions, concerns that people want to talk about. If there's someone who wants to step up to lead the effort and talk about what next steps could look like. Originally Publius had intended to publish a document of sorts containing all the information that they are aware of with regards to, leads on the exploiter, where the funds deposited in Tornado may have come from, things like that. They were originally intending to publish that in the Discord, but there was a lot of comments from the community that mentioned it'd be best to only share that with folks who were directing the effort. So that is unlikely to be shared publicly, but as I understand it, next week their legal counsel still intends to come do a Q&A of sorts for the community to ask questions and get answers. And I guess one other thing I'll add before opening up the floor is I feel like a lot of the tension was around who is going to do the work, and just would like to share personally that I feel like it's not necessarily the right philosophy for the DAO to think that all the work necessary to be done in the Beanstalk ecosystem to be funneled through and worked on by BF necessarily. BF is just one organization with limited resources, and of course there was a great precedent set by Beansprout in funding its own organization to work on things unrelated to exactly what Beanstalk Farms is focused on. And feel like if someone's interested in spending the time to figure out how we can get a new recovery effort funded, always happy to help and provide guidance on that front. Hey Publius, don't mean to call you out necessarily, but curious if you had any input you wanted to share verbally at the DAO meeting with regards to some of the comments you dropped in the Discord over the last couple of days.
Gee, I'm sorry we're a few minutes late. We are obviously collectively all in a real-time experimentation phase, and yesterday tried to put out some written content in the Discord to sort of complement the discussion happening in the DAO meetings, particularly now that there's less audio-based meetings happening. And so seems like there was a very positive response generally. And, as we all look to improve how we communicate with one another to tackle these pretty complicated things, we will continue to try to do our best to help foster a really productive discussion. So don't have any specific comments to make, but feel like this is the long haul, and we're just getting started.
Great. We'll leave it open for a moment to see if folks want to hop in or share any thoughts on that front with what's been said in the Discord over the last day or so. Great. And if not, we'll leave some time at the end as well. Feel free to drop any questions or comments in the Barnyard chat. On this end, as far as development goes, we'll keep my update relatively brief. The long and the short of it is that either at some point by the end of this week or early next, we hope to share the drafts for a few different proposals. and start discussion, more formally in the Discord about them. So the first of which is the Sunrise Improvements BIP, which we've been talking about for a while. I believe Halborn is auditing an updated commit hash of that. That changed after some more internal code review. And that is the BIP that implements the Dutch auction in the field, which was a much discussed community initiative later last year. The other proposal, or other BIP rather, is one related to enabling stock delegation on the various snapshot pages in the Beanstalk ecosystem. That is, the Beanstalk Farms page, the Beanstalk DAO page, etc. And that is the result of a lot of the conversation happening around the last time the budget BIP was proposed with regards to, comments around stockholder voting participation and the like. So interested to see what people think of that one. And in particular, after we share that, we will open a forum for people to be able to, more formally apply to be a stock delegate, where folks can drop their address, talk about why they think other stockholders should delegate their votes to them, etc. There are also a couple other proposals, one of which I think BLC has heard to talk a bit about with regards to BeaNFTs, and then Mod is also going to talk about a bean sprout proposal they're intending to propose. But I think BLC, if you're around, it would be awesome if you could talk a bit about what you've been working on as of late.
GM, do you hear me?
Can hear you great.
Awesome. Okay, so I think for maybe 2 or 3 months this year, I've been stewing, working away in the background on how we improve BeaNFTs and how BeaNFT holders are organized, and coming up with a proposal to introduce to the DAO to create a BeaNFT DAO. Currently, at this time, there's no kind of formal representation of BeaNFT holders, and therefore, no governance processes around the BeaNFT contracts at this time. So, looking to just put this proposal up, have some good discussion around, hear from BeaNFT holders, get their thoughts, and see what we can do to further decentralize this community. Right now, these are contracts that are held by individuals rather than groups. So look to see what we can do there, and also look to see what we can do in terms of implementing proposals for future collections, upgrades to existing collections, and such like that. So the full proposal will go up in due course, and looking forward to discussion in the Discord regarding that.
Great, thanks for walking us through that, BLC. Mod, did you want to talk about what the proposal you were intending to share with the DAO would look like?
Yes, can you hear me, Guy?
Sounds great.
Yeah, and thank you for that. So hi everyone. As Guy said, we're thinking or intend on proposing a beansprout proposal for a grant. And this grant is for Pharos. Pharos is the rename, or we rebranded Moduland that I presented, I think, some time ago to the DAO. To those who were there before, or they're hearing about this for the first time, I'm just going to drop a few links and then maybe briefly explain what are we doing, and then what is the grant for. So all right, so Pharos is an on-chain prime broker. What this basically really means is that we, or what that technically is that we would allow anyone to deploy a lending market for any asset through an order book and an order book style. What we're thinking, or the reason we're asking for this grant, is that one of the markets we would like to launch with or deploy is a lending market for pods. The way that would work is that pod holders would be able to use pod as collateral and then take out a loan for their pods, and then they could do different things with their loan. I'm going to drop in a quick diagram that maybe is an example, and hopefully the proposal will have more details. And of course, I'm always happy to take any answers, any questions now, or just chat anytime on the Discord. Okay, so what I dropped in here is two examples of what you can do, with pods. So what the grant will entitle is that we will develop a pod oracle, and then that would be able to price pods. In this example that I'm having here are two loan examples. The first one is taking an under collateralized loan with your pods, and then you can do certain things with it. In this example, you're using Uniswap to swap, the loan that you took out for ETH. So here you come in with your pods, you take out a loan of USDC, and then you go to Uniswap, and then you swap your USDC for ETH. The other example is that you take an over collateralized loan, which is probably more common in general, and that would work the same way that you take out a loan on Liquidity or Aave and so on, and then you'd also still use your pods as collateral. But let me know if this is this explanation is clear on what we intend to do. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions. There will be a proposal that will come out, and maybe the last thing to mention is the amount of the grant that we're seeking. So we're asking for 25,000 beans. The intention is that we want to launch by the end of Q2. The beans that we requested or the intention is for those not to be newly minted beans. There was a proposal that passed earlier for the chicken coop, and our intention with this proposal is to ask for or to allocate some of that previously minted beans to this effort. I hope this was clear enough, and once again, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Hey, Mod, super interesting. Two questions. One, are you familiar with the irrigation protocol? And I'm curious if you've chatted with them about any possible overlap in what you guys offer into how is the pods oracle going to determine the price of a pod?
Yeah, so briefly, I think I'm briefly familiar with irrigation, but not the details of it. So maybe Simil, I see that you're here. You can talk about what the overlap is. We can briefly talk about how we intend on pricing pods. So we would be using the pod marketplace as the place where liquidity is available in order to liquidate the pods. So the way that it'll work is we will be taking anyway. So you can always price pods the way that you want to, right? The oracle can work in any way, but this is one example of how we are going to do it. So it'll be a weighted average on the available liquidity to sell pods on the pod marketplace, and this will basically be the maximum amount that you can take out, or you can take out loans using pods. How would that work then is that once the price of the pods reach the liquidation price, then what the liquidation would be is that the pods that are used as collateral will be taken, and then they will be liquidated in the pod marketplace through the the sell now orders. Is that clear, or does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. I guess the only concern is the pod marketplace now is not particularly liquid. So if there's a higher value order placed, and then if someone wanted to take a loan against those pods, and then that order was canceled, then you actually would not have the liquidity to liquidate the pods that I put up as collateral, which could bring some, set the system to a point where there's not enough backing to be able to repay the loan.
Yeah, so two things here. One is you are correct that the amount of loans issued will be limited to the amount of liquidity available in the pod marketplace. So you'd expect it to scale, accordingly. But that is, a limitation for sure. The second point is there is always going to be a risk where liquidations fail. So that is also something to keep or take into consideration. But lastly, there will be some sort of a margin. So, the minimal collateralization ratio, let's say it's like 130% or 140%. And in theory, that should give you or will give you the, the leeway for if someone cancels an order or something like that happens, then the price will drop and you would still be able to liquidate. And the amount of risk or margin they want to take is open, so you can make it 200% just to be like super careful or so, or 500%, whatever it is, the amount of like risk you would like to take against that loan.
So how will you price the interest in terms of, let's say I want to borrow USDC against my pods, how is that interest rate determined?
Yeah, that will be up to the lender. So the lender who will accept, pods as collateral, it will be up to them to choose what is the lending terms that they want to give out. Maybe we can take a step back quickly on the way that Pharos would work. Is that lenders would be able to fully customize the lending terms. So you, as a lender who is happy to take in pods, you would also choose, what are the terms that you want to lend out, your USDC or whatever asset it is that you're lending out. That includes the origination fee, the interest rate, and so on.
And say you're a lender and you're interested in closing your position before the borrower is interested in repaying. Is there a way to make that possible?
Sorry, Pizan, I'm not sure if I understood this, but I heard it.
Yeah, so let's say, let's say you have pods and I'm willing to loan you USDC against your pods. And let's say I want my USDC back, but you're not ready to repay the loan. Is there some way that the loaner of the USDC can close their position early and get their USDC back?
Yeah, so that would also be one of the terms for the lender. So the lender would choose what is the duration of that loan that they want to give out. Maybe it would be for like a month, and after that month, then anyone can close that loan or liquidate it. Or it could be perpetual, and in that case, it would only be when the borrower closes the loan.
You mentioned a launch date of sometime in Q2. Does that include a full audit of the code, and will it be open source?
No audit. Of course, we would like to get it audited, and we'll do that. But we currently don't have funding or plans to get it audited. So the proposal will add that as one of the risks, that the grant that we're seeking will not cover any audit.
Just a quick question for the co-op idea. That was 90,000 beans were minted when that was approved through a Beanstalk proposal several months ago. So you're proposing to reallocate 25,000 beans from that. Is that correct, Mod?
Correct, Sync.
So is the co-op essentially scrapped at this point?
I think Breen would probably be able to give out an answer to that, but from my understanding is that it is currently on hold, or actually maybe Breen would be able to shed more light on that.
Cool.
Wouldn't say scrapped, but given that no one has stepped up and requested for a job, and my current focus is getting the major components of Beanstalk to be implemented, it's not on the top of priority list currently, but will be implemented eventually in the future.
I want to hop in here and ask a quick question. Does anyone maybe have like a relationship with some of the guys at Euler? Because it seems like not only did they help get Euler, and that looked like that was a pretty successful recovery, but also they helped Sentiment as well. Have there been any efforts to engage anyone from the Euler team, or I mean, I think they also use Chainalysis, but I'm obviously not totally sure about what routes they took. But has anyone tried to approach them yet about how they went about it, or if they have kind of ideas or tools or resources that they found pretty successful in that process?
Hey, I can comment on this. I know it's a secondary to what Mod's proposal is, so I want to respect Mod's proposal, though. Mod, I can talk about this later.
I think if no one has any question regarding the grant, of course, let's move topics.
Cool. Yeah. So just to quickly address your question, Ishan. Yeah, after the DAO call last week, I actually had an exchange with Taylor Monahan from MetaMask. So she was one of the lead contributors that helped the Euler finance team on their recovery effort. She was actually the first one that they thanked in their Twitter thread about it. So unfortunately, the Euler finance team is kind of locked down. Their comms are totally locked down. I've tried to reach out to people that are part of their community, and it's just what it is. But I was able to engage with Taylor, and I referenced some of the tweets that she and I exchanged. She had some interesting insights as far as the Beanstalk recovery effort. Long story short, she pretty much said that the Kraken lead, as promising as it may be, unless we connect the dots through a formal investigation, we're not going to really get anywhere. So I can share that her thread or her comments with you. They're in the BOP-2 channel as well if you want to take a look there.
When you say a formal investigation, what do you mean?
An in-depth investigation of everything that's going on with the exploit, all the transactions, 22,000 plus on Tornado Cash. You can't just the
Is
Kraken
Taylor
lead in and of
suggesting we do
itself.
this privately, or is this something
She
that
actually
law
recommended
enforcement
chain
should be doing?
analysis. So Taylor brought up chain analysis. So she asked me, has Beanstalk engaged chain analysis? And I responded to her and I said that chain analysis, my understanding based off of the previous communications that Beanstalk Farms has shared, that chain analysis was engaged, but they wanted a $300,000 retainer. So she actually explicitly referenced chain analysis.
But I'm just trying to understand, like, what the contents of the formal report you're talking about. Like, what would be the thing in the report that would get us further along the path than we have the Kraken connect? Like, what would be in the report?
I will share what her comments were with everybody in the Barnyard chat, and people can infer from that what she is meaning. I can't say what she was meaning beyond that.
Thanks, Hank. You said in the Barnyard chat?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the thread now, so I'll just go ahead and. So she originally, Unbanksy, put out a thread, about just in general about the exploit, and so this was her original response to it. And then she and I had and this was several hours after the DAO call last week, because I know Al and several other community members had asked me as an action item from that call to kind of see if I could reach out to Euler. So I tried, but obviously that didn't really get anywhere. But Taylor was probably the best I could do given the circumstances. So that was her original response, and then we had a few more. I'll share some additional replies that she shared with me.
Mod, could you briefly describe what Chainalysis communicated to you last year when they were intending to speak at the DAO meeting and then decided not to?
Yes, and most of this is going to be, as I can best recollect it. So they reached out through, I think it was through one of our farmers here. I can't remember their name. But anyways, they reached out to us, and we first had a call where we briefly went through what happened, and then we had another call with their CTO, if I remember correctly. And in there, they mentioned, or they requested that for us to be engaged with them for a year, and also for them to to do that source of analysis. We told them then is that we for us to do something like that, we wanted to know or there to be some sort of a lead that they were going after. So they told us that they had some leads, and then during that call we asked them to tell us what those leads were, because some of those leads were turned out to be just like misdirections. I think there was, I can't remember the other exchanges, but there were a few leads, I think, or one or two leads that were like, meant to spoof us. So they said, okay, that they were going to look into it and then come and present to the DAO in a DAO meeting. And then a few days later, they came back and they were like, that they were going to cancel the meeting. My interpretation on why they canceled it is, from my thinking, is that they maybe spent a little bit of time on what they thought was a lead, and they found out that it wasn't like worth pursuing. But again, this is my interpretation. I'm not certain or sure why they decided not to come.
Makes sense. And just for everyone's reference, whenever some of these conversations had resurfaced a few weeks ago, I asked Mod to, forward me some of the information, and tried to reach out to a couple different folks that Mod had talked to from their team, had gotten a response, filled out the form on their site, and then they're asking for context on, why Beanstalk or why the DAO might be interested in working with them after all the conversations that they had with Mod last year, and found it really strange and, frankly, a bit unprofessional. So that's not to say that, someone from the DAO shouldn't, meet with them and see what they can offer, but just wanted to provide that as context.
Yeah, just to add that our thinking then was, or our concern then was that it was going to be an opt contract with, with no understanding on what exactly are we like pursuing or doing. And they also, I think, expressed that it wasn't going to be like a short-term thing. It was going to take over a year or so, and we continuously monitored it until someone loses interest in pursuing this, and hence we didn't do that because we weren't knowing, or we didn't think that it was worth pursuing then, just given that there wasn't like much to go after, which I think is still the concern to an extent to some members. That we're unsure what exactly it is that we're going after.
Yeah, and just to reemphasize what I mentioned in the Discord yesterday, what Mod and I are describing are just our opinions, two community members' opinions. So, if folks feel particularly inclined to engage with Chainalysis and see what they have to offer, I'm happy to help out on that front.
Yeah, in Taylor's response where she mentioned Chainalysis, she, in a separate tweet, she had mentioned that the outputs from Tornado Cash should be easier to kind of sort out at this point, because apparently the Ronin hack, that those outputs have already been identified. And so, just connecting the dots here, in general, she just mentioned that her tools at her disposal are not as robust as a company like Chainalysis, which specializes in this type of thing, or an intelligence on chain or lossless or what have you. So in general, regardless whatever avenue, if this is pursued by the DAO as a DAO supported effort, we're going to need the resources of these types of subject matter experts to support us on that front. So. And actually, that builds on my question earlier. To be frank with you, is because Mod's proposal is from this previously allocated 90,000 beans that were minted for the co-op idea, but I also understand Breen's point that there's other development priorities that take precedent at this point, and quite frankly, Liquidy's chicken bonds idea, as great as it is, unless there's a real like yield source that's actively kicking, it doesn't really spark, and you can kind of see that with how chicken bonds has kind of deflated in recent months. So one of the things that I was thinking of immediately, based off of the conversation on today's calls, in regards to a DAO coordinated investigation effort, would it be possible to partially or fully fund that with some of the beans that were previously minted from the co-op idea, through a beans prop proposal, if that's a possibility, instead of a BIP. So I'm just throwing that out there to kind of see if that's possible. So.
Well, the beans weren't minted for the chicken bonds idea. They were minted for the bean sprout proposal, or for the bean sprout budget. But yeah, your point still stands. I mean, it's a great question. I mean, to some extent, it's like, the beans are custodied by the Coop multisig, I believe. So I guess in a way, it's like, I don't know who has say over that. Is it Brain? Is it okay for funds, allocated for the Bean Sprout budget, which is sort of around like, accelerator projects in the building in the ecosystem, that those can be reused for something unrelated? Not sure I have a good answer for you. We should talk. We feel like we should discuss that now if folks are interested.
Yeah, from my perspective, I'm more than happy to bring the money, the beans back in custody of Beansprout. But I think, Manifold, resigned his position as Beansprout manager, so I'm not sure who would lead the efforts there.
Well, not sure that any effort needs to be led on the front of like managing the funds per se. There's still a multi-sig that can custody the funds. So not concerned about that per se. But yeah, were there be a proposal to use the funds just as if it were a BIP, presumably there would be someone proposing and leading that project, which is sort of the crux of the argument that I was outlining in the general channel yesterday. So I don't know. I guess open question. What do folks think of? I guess one of the questions I'm posing, based on Sync's question, is like, is it acceptable for, I guess these funds that were technically meant to fund projects in the ecosystem, now this organization doesn't really exist anymore. Is it acceptable for those funds to be reused for other purposes?
Hey, sorry, I just have a question. With regards to any kind of investigation or recovery, I do think we should have a written out proposal just so people know what's happening versus talking about it. But in terms of the fund usage, just help me understand. So when, like earlier on the call, when Mod was talking about redeploying funds from elsewhere to do something, like would that be the same thing as this, or would this be different?
Yeah, similar. So I'll just restate like the high level what happened. So there was a Q4 Beansprout budget BIP. In general, Beansprout was intended to fund different projects working in the Beanstalk ecosystem. Beansprout was intended to be like an accelerator for those projects in a way. And one of the projects that proposed the most of the remaining beans in the Beansprout budget was Breen's Coop idea, which was a fork of Liquidity chicken bonds. I believe that was for 90,000 beans. I think there's like 3,000 beans or less or fewer left in the Beansprout multisig. And Manifold doesn't run Beansprout anymore. I guess that sort of means Beansprout as an organization doesn't really exist to some extent. And so Mod's idea was, if Brain was comfortable with it, using some of the funds originally intended to be used for the Coop development. Now, technically, at some level, you wouldn't really need a proposal for that if it's just Brain deciding. But given that the proposal was to use the beans for the Coop development, I think Mod felt it would be appropriate to have the DAO vote on it, even if the funds aren't coming from the Beansprout multisig necessarily. So to the question, would any other use of those funds follow a similar process? I suppose the answer would be yes. And let me know if that wasn't clear. I guess the difference being is that Pharos would be developing, tech that is beneficial for Beanstalk, similar to the ethos of what Beansprout was for. Whereas, funding a analytics firm for recovery effort does feel like a bit of a different thing, but maybe that's okay. And, to Sing's point, a Beansprout proposal would certainly be lower friction than the BIP proposal process.
Yeah,
Got it.
I
Okay.
don't expect like an answer on today's call. Like I just thought I would just throw the idea out there, and happy to discuss this further, considering the next steps and what the best approach may be. Obviously, want to respect Mod's proposal, and he's obviously should be able to propose that. I don't want this to kind of interfere with that in any way. So just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I mean that what you explained, that generally makes sense. I think as long as it's easier for me to think of just guiding principles, as long as there's a general guiding principle of the least possible path to friction, I think that makes sense, right? If it's some large, big new change that we're proposing that actually needs beans minted, I think going the full vote process, et cetera, makes a ton of sense. If it's something where the beans are already sitting somewhere and they're not allocated for something and we have a general consensus on what we want to do, then maybe we take that path. But it's difficult to say without having something specific.
Yeah, given that, it seems like you are in agreement that the next step would be to actually draft a proposal independent of what type it is. Yeah, I guess making a decision on this front isn't necessarily the blocker at the moment, as far as where the funds come from. But I mean, so I guess while we're here, while we're talking about it, like IPO and Chill or Sync, I feel like, you two guys have been some of the more vocal around either working with an analytics firm of some sort. So I guess I'm curious from your perspective, what you feel like the next steps are, if any, to make that happen.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, just reading what Taylor said last week kind of reinforced me that we're going to need some sort of subject matter expert in this regard, whether it's chain analysis or whoever. Happy to pursue this through this Beansprout proposal idea if that's a possibility. And potentially work with Intelligence on Chain or whoever the community is agreeable to working with. They seem to be the most, in terms of cost, at least relative to what Chain Analysis had previously quoted. Right now at least they seem to be the most agreeable. But yeah, as far as spearheading this, I'm happy to continue to do that and work with IPO and Chill on that front, and put together a proposal if that's the required next step. So I'm happy that we clarified this on today's call. I think that was very, I appreciate that. And, we can sort out the details moving forward.
For what it's worth, and I know that, sorry if I'm not sure how I cut off, but I'm going to say this.
Go ahead, Mod. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that the name Chainalysis goes around, and I remember even when I reached out to Zach, he also mentioned Chainalysis. But for what it's worth, from our experience, I think it was Lossless who were the ones that were most engaged.
I guess I just have a question, Sync, or I don't know if Sync you want to answer or if somebody else has an idea. But is the idea here that we would let's say we somebody writes a proposal and we mint some beans to fund an intelligence effort. Is the idea that we would then take, say, I don't know, like, does it come back with some information that the DAO intends to take to law enforcement, or is the idea just to sort of try to uncover some more information of things that law enforcement may have missed? Or I guess I'm just sort of curious, like, what the intended result is of working with one of these analytics firms.
Yeah, my understanding based off of last week's when Jason presented is that essentially he would, whether it's him speaking for his firm, I presume anybody else would do something similar, is they would provide a report to the DAO, and any community member could essentially provide that report to their respective law enforcement authorities in their country, right? So whether it's in the United States, in the UK, what have you, right? This is a global community at the end of the day. So Beyond that, I can't definitively say, to be frank with you. I wish I had more information. I wish Euler's finance team wasn't locked down in their communications and I could pick their brains as to how they made it work on their side, but I just don't have that. So it would be disingenuous of me to kind of give you guys a clear cut, like this is what we're going to do with this, but at the very least, it may help to Taylor's point, in her response on Twitter to me last week, it may help to at least maybe better connect some of the dots as far as all this is concerned. And to Mod's point, if lossless, if they were the ones who in fact originally flagged this potential Kraken lead, though, if they are, if they're open to working with the community, then that's cool too, So it's I'm not really fixated on one specific firm or what have you. I'm just looking to get something moving if possible, and as soon as possible. So,
Well, just to bring it back around to what I was, the message I dropped in the Discord, this is sort of where the rubber meets the road, and someone would need to, make a decision around, recommending the community fund an initiative with lossless or with analytics on chain. I think there might be a group chat somewhere where we could connect that person interested in, making that evaluation with lossless. So, not that any decision needs to be made today about who that is, but just, open call that if that's something the community wants, happy to help facilitate that.
yeah, I appreciate that, and I don't know if they have provided a quote for like an investigation. If you guys have that information, I mean, we know what Jason's cost would be for intelligence on chain, but if lossless has a comparable, maybe we can present both options in a proposal and just be like, hey, this is the options on the table, and kind of let the DAO decide.
I don't think we ever got a quote from lossless. The work then was, or they were working then with the expectation of the 10% bounty that we had, or that the DAO had offered them, which also explains maybe why they also stopped at some point.
Okay, I actually hit a dead end with them too. I reached out to their CMO, Monica, after BOP-2 was approved and the ethical return contract was deployed back in January. She initially acknowledged my messages, and then I asked for a follow-up, and I kind of never got anywhere with her. So,
I believe we are in touch with someone from there. So, like, as this conversation continues or progresses, and we want to continue, we'll probably be happy to, or we'll be happy to, like, introduce you.
okay, great. So I think as a kind of actionable item from this call, I'll just work with I'll start drafting something up based off of the possibility of potentially doing this through a Beanstalk proposal, and Guy, I'll share that with you or in the BOP-2 channel, whatever is the most agreeable approach, and we can go from there.
Yeah, and I would add, if there are specific questions, like in the course of, I do want to move quickly, but in the course of asking lossless and Chainalysis and whoever else pops up what they can offer, if you have questions, I think it sounds like the BOP-2 chat is the best place to put them, Sync, just to keep them all in one place versus putting them in general.
Okay, sounds good.
So yeah, so I guess if there are members here that have questions that they'd want forwarded to those guys, then put them in the BOP-2 chat, and then I think I can just add something in the general chat if community members have questions for any of the potential vendors.
I feel like, from my perspective, and I think we're still sort of discussing whether we should use, reallocating some of the funds from Beansprout to fund this sort of initiative. But I do sort of feel like maybe the friction involved with getting a BIP passed would be sort of an opportunity to ensure that the quality of the proposal is sort of solid, in the sense that it drives towards the direction that the community is interested in sort of getting to, in terms of whatever engagement we're sort of interested in pursuing with any of these firms. And the outcomes that we sort of are hoping to get from that. I think that could actually be a productive sort of result of maybe having, it sounds like Sync is the individual who's going to write the proposal, which in this case I think it might be productive for it to be a BIP instead of using the Beansprout funds, but just sort of thinking out loud here.
Yeah, I was gonna do a quick straw poll in the Barnard chat, trying to figure out how to word this question exactly, if you'll give me a minute. But if folks want to keep discussing, by all means.
I guess I'm curious to hear if others disagree with that, and if they feel strongly that it should be a reallocation of some of the Beansprout funds in the accelerator. But open to just hearing some more thoughts there.
Does it come in below that monetary threshold that would require being a BIP?
That was
Like
going
100
to be my comment. Like, I think it depends on the amount. So with intelligence on chain, that shakes out to around 13,000 a month. So in my opinion, that would be way too small. Chainalysis, last I saw, they quoted 300K for the year. I don't know if their rates went up because those rates are a year old. Obviously, if the engagement's much bigger and new beans have to be minted, then answer by default, I think it would have to be more formal. So I think it depends on how it looks. More conceptually speaking, I think like expediency is important here. And then on top of that, just generally speaking, I mean, look at the usual attendance of these DAO meetings. And then even in the past for actual important proposals, quorum has been an issue. So it may not, just because the proposal is very well thought through doesn't necessarily mean people are going to show up to vote, which would end in a process dead end that is not even related to the merit of the proposal. So my general view would be, to the extent that we can, since all the people who care enough about it are already involved, maybe we can just hold ourselves accountable and make sure the proposal is what we want it to be, similar to what we've done with the Scribe marketing engagement and other things where we haven't gone through the formal process. But to the extent that the thing, ends up being a $300,000 engagement, then, by default, we might have to go through the formal process.
Yeah, it's a good point that it totally depends on what the proposal actually is, which at this case, it seems like we're still trying to figure out what the different options are. So that's a good point.
Yeah, and I just want to echo the fact that when Chainalysis quoted their $300,000, they were pretty clear, according to what BF has shared with us, is that they didn't promise anything, right? And Jason similarly said the same thing on his presentation on the 30th. So an investigation will help potentially connect some of these dots a bit better and maybe help the authorities move things along if possible. But we have to be very clear here that if the community agrees to move forward, that there should not be any expectation whatsoever that we're going to recover anything. It needs to be very clearly established, and I just want to re-emphasize that the primary goal here is to follow up based off of some of the people that have done stuff like this, such as Taylor Monahan with the Euler finance recovery, based off of their suggestions to maybe hopefully connect some of these dots a bit better. Beyond that, we can't definitively say what the outcome will be. So just want to be clear on that.
So I just dropped a straw poll in the Barnyard chat. Would be curious to get a temp check from folks. The choices in the multiple choice are probably not ideal, but just coming up with this on the fly. And then the other thing is on the amount of beans. I guess Breen mentioned that they'd be comfortable sending the coop funds back to the Beansprout multisig, and that would leave the Beansprout multisig with about 93,000 beans. Mod's proposal was for 25,000. So whatever the difference is would be what would be left in the Beansprout multisig.
Yeah, just based off of the numbers that we have from the intelligence on chain, that would be 40,000 for up to 3 months. It may be less if they can knock it out in less than 3 months. And then perhaps we could agree to some automated monitoring for, let's say, 6 months after the fact, which would would be an additional, I believe, 9,000 or so. So and that would still give us some beans left over to do work with something else. So I'm not looking to use up all the remaining beans on this. If we're strictly looking at what the quote that Intelligence on Chain offered us, chain analysis, but like IPO said, their quote was 25,000 a month. So much more, it's a more costly quote, but something to consider as well. So
I know I briefly mentioned this before, but maybe I can reiterate it, which is I think if the DAO is to pursue such an effort, I would prioritize figuring out how to deal with law enforcement versus being on on-chain analysis. I understand some said why not do both. Great if you do both, but again, I would say the priority is to figure out what is it that we're going, or how are we going to deal with law enforcement versus just doing further analysis and reports.
So I agree with Mod's point here, and I think hopefully that information will help sort of drive the sort of proposal, or the thought process behind which engagement we should pursue with which firm for what information.
And just to be clear, Mod, in the message that Lossless sent last April, my interpretation of that message was that they don't have connections at law enforcement. Is that interpretation correct?
I believe they do, but again, you can't do it. So even if you know someone at law enforcement, it can't be you that goes there. It needs, from my understanding, again, it needs to be a victim or someone who lost money.
Okay.
So Lossless, as far as I remember, reached out to both Kraken and Etherscan, and both of them told them that you need to get law enforcement involved to release or uncover the data.
Okay, so as a next step, just to kind of close the loop on all this, we can move on to something else. I'll start working on some sort of preliminary draft off the assumption that some of these beans that are remain from prior bean sprout allocation may be used towards such an effort. And again, not looking to exhaust all of those beans. So want to respect Mod's proposal, want to respect anybody else in the community that may have other ideas for some of those remaining beans as well. I don't think that we would need to use all of that. So just want to be clear on that point. And thank you again, everybody, for this conversation today. I think it was very productive. And sometimes having vocal conversations is much more productive than typing. So
100%.
Yeah, man. Thanks for spearheading this sync and keeping the ball rolling. And sometimes it can be tough. I'm crushing it, man.
no problem. And like I said in the BOP-2 channel, I did, Intelligence on Chain's on vacation this week. He already shared this with us. So, he's not planning to be on the DAO call next week. So I just want to be clear with everybody. But his door is open, and he's, depending on how the community decides to move forward, whether it's with him or whoever, to several of the comments that I'm seeing in the Barnyard chat, I think we just need to be clear about expectations with whoever we ultimately decide to move forward with this, if we do move forward. So.
Well, I sort of hope that if and when the proposal gets written, that in the proposal there is sort of a clear recommendation on like which firm we're going to hire, what they're going to produce, and like how we're going to use that information. So I guess I'm sort of hoping like less of the community sort of like voting on different engagements, and more that an individual can sort of think about the situation and take all of the context and sort of package it into a proposal is sort of my thinking here. But yeah, otherwise, happy to sort of support the effort and looking forward to seeing how it develops.
Yes, Sync. I don't know if I'll just say this quickly. I think that's the general idea here, just to keep it as quick and easy as possible. Like I don't think anyone wants this to drag on. This shouldn't be the primary focus. Like my vision here is that this is just something that just occurs in the background, and if there's anything meaningful, there is, and if not, and it doesn't drag on. So, with regards to potential proposal, I would say think of it more as a recommendation. We just need to obviously get some more information, renewed rates from some of these other firms, and then we have a very, very good idea of what Jason or Intelligence on Chain would cost. I think we just have to ask some follow-up questions about what the services would entail, which are going to be easier to do, outside of the 420 call. So, maybe, Sync, I can connect with you offline, but maybe within the course of a week or 2 weeks, we can, depending on how long it takes people to get back to us, we can probably have something.
Yeah, sounds good for sure. Happy to move this forward if possible. So.
Great. Thanks, guys. So, yeah, just acknowledging we're at the hour, but also wanted to acknowledge that I know some of the Scribe folks showed up today, and Isha, I'm not sure if you had some questions for the community to get feedback on, or my memory escapes me. I know we talked about yesterday, maybe you had some questions about some of the roadmap and upcoming developments.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were looking at. Is so just to kind of give a TLDR of the conversation we had yesterday is like like totally for obviously all kind of like recovery efforts, and happy to support in any way we can there. But for us, that's not, at least like on the marketing effort, like that's not really a focus for us, not something we want to really talk about too much. But we want to focus on is like kind of going forward. And I think like the conversation that we had in our marketing weekly yesterday was around how can we kind of add a little bit of a jolt, or a little bit of a kind of revamp to some of the general apathy that we've kind of seen around the protocol in the community. And I think one of the ways that we've seen to do that really successfully is like roadmap talk, right? Like markets and users in the space are generally pretty forward looking. Everybody likes to get excited about what's kind of coming down the pipeline and the roadmap. And so we've been thinking about kind of some strong campaign planning and a little bit of a strong push to kind of get back in front of everybody's faces and kind of show them that our focus is kind of on the head. And so with that, we've been looking at kind of running a strong campaign in the month of May as we kind of prep for Wells, to kind of show almost like we're thinking of something like a Bean manifesto, or something along the lines of like a large roadmap to kind of get people excited about, okay, well, this is what's coming down the roadmap. This is how, this is why you should kind of join, get excited about the protocol, etc. So one of the things that we wanted to come to this call to look at was, and I know we talked about a little bit of this in our kind of technical deep dive, but kind of wanted to rehash and revamp some of it. Is like, maybe at least for now, I mean, like we don't have at least I don't have a bunch of time, and I don't think Joey and Rob do either. But if we can kind of get a look at the roadmap over the next, call it, the next kind of 2-3 quarters, or at least rest of the year, like what is the kind of revamp for us? What does the dev roadmap look like, so that we can start to put out content? And also, what's the kind of Publi's appetite for kind of like putting out some of this content into the Bean Farmers account and such?
So, just to be clear, I guess one of the asks is to like have a dedicated call to like dig into all the upcoming roadmap stuff.
Yeah, I think that would probably be best, since we don't have a whole ton of time here. So maybe we can have like, maybe we can take kind of, if earlier, if better, but at worst, maybe we can have Poops come to the kind of marketing weekly and kind of give us the whole roadmap so that we can take that, transcribe that, and then put that into into the roadmap content that we're planning to put out. So what we kind of imagine is like a big kind of, hey, this is what's happening, and this is what is on the roadmap and on the dev roadmap as far as improving the Beanstalk protocol and getting people excited about what's going to be happening and what's coming down the pipeline. So yeah, any kind of help or thought that we can get there, I think it'd be pretty helpful for us as far as that content.
Yeah, and apologies for recommending we do that on this call. Wasn't expecting for us to cover so much ground, but on the other hand, it was great to have so much discussion here. So yeah, we can. Well, assuming, I mean, Publius, do you feel equipped to have a conversation like that as far as like things we're working on over the next 6 months or so to prime the scribe guys?
Of course.
Great. All right. Yeah, let's we can schedule something. Consider it done.
With regards to the question around our willingness to put out content on this front, we recognize that we do need to take a real part in this type of discussion, but would say that we're still figuring it out as well, and so happy to start the conversation, but don't think that we're going to have all the answers. But with that said, obviously more than happy to chat.
Okay, yeah, definitely helpful. Yeah, as long as we can kind of get inside your heads a little bit and kind of see how the roadmap is shaping up, I think I think it would help galvanize a lot of people if we put out a lot of content around what's coming down the pipeline, and people will get kind of excited to re-engage. And then I think that'll also help on the community front as well, as like we can kind of start to move more conversations forward looking rather than backward looking. I think that's always good for everybody. Nothing. I guess nothing too big of an ask here. I guess we can just we'll just coordinate and we'll get a time where we can have like a larger roadmap discussion.
Totally. Sweet. Alrighty. Anything else folks want to go over, discuss, ask questions about?
Guy, I didn't have a chance to give an update, but I can just give a few sentences if that's all right.
Sure.
Did a lot of work on the Wells UX this week and actually getting really excited about the direction it's going in. Think we're on track to have like a full clickable prototype in 2 weeks. And in general, I think the idea here is to sort of like point all of the messaging and the vibes and the aesthetic towards this idea that we're building these open source primitives, particularly the stacks, in a way that doesn't require governance tokens or fee tokens. And I think the thing to highlight is the architecture. So hope to have like the full sort of MVP of the UX in a week, and then the next week after that we'll spend trying to round out the animations and the illustrations. But if anyone has opinions or is sort of curious what that looks like, I would love to show it to you. So please send me a message. But that's it from my side.
Amazing. Thanks, Robins. All right, I think we can call it there. And before we wrap, we'll just give a huge +1 to what Sync pointed out earlier around, the conversations being much more high fidelity here over voice than in the Discord. And, want to encourage everyone when they see problems in the community, they have things they want to speak up about, to do so. And feel like this was a really high quality discussion overall. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you in Discord.